Muslim scholar dies, returns with a shocking truth about paradise. My name is Dr. Alim Rahman, and my life was a meticulously constructed edifice of sacred text. For 35 years, I was a professor of Islamic eschatology, the study of the end times, the day of judgment, and the nature of the afterlife. I was considered one of the foremost authorities on the Quranic and hadithic descriptions of paradise and hell. My library was my kingdom, filled with commentaries and theological treatises that mapped the geography of the unseen world. I could lecture for hours on the specific qualities of the rivers of Jannah, the types of trees in its gardens, the nature of the garments its inhabitants would wear. My faith was an intellectual certainty, a profound respect for a divine system that was perfect, complete, and unchanging. Allah, to me, was the divine architect who had given us the final, perfect blueprint in the Qur'an. To be a good Muslim was to study this blueprint, to admire its perfection, and to follow its instructions with precision, hoping to one day be granted entry into the magnificent structure it described. Paradise was a destination, a reward, for a life of obedience. I taught that belief, I wrote books about it, and I lived by it. My wife, Samira, had a faith that was, to my mind, far less structured and far more emotional. She found God not in the intricate details of a text, but in the feeling of the sun on her face, in the taste of a fresh date, in the quiet tears she shed during her pre-dawn prayers. Her relationship with God was a love affair. Mine was a contract of loyal service. I found her approach sweet, but lacking the rigorous intellectual foundation I believed was necessary for unshakable faith. Our daughter Zara was another world entirely. A brilliant astrophysicist, her universe was one of quantum mechanics and cosmic microwave background radiation. She saw my life's work as a beautiful mythology, a collection of ancient stories that provided moral comfort but held no claim on literal truth. "Dad," she once said, her eyes full of a gentle, pitying love, "you study the poetry of the universe, and I study its mathematics. We just speak different languages." Sometimes, in the quiet solitude of my study, surrounded by the greatest minds of Islamic history, I would feel a strange, hollow ache. It was a spiritual thirst that no amount of knowledge could quench. I felt like a man who owned the most detailed map of the ocean in the world, but had never once felt the salt spray on his face. I dismissed these feelings as moments of spiritual fatigue, a test from God, and I would immerse myself once more in the comforting certainty of the written word. I was at the pinnacle of my career, preparing a series of lectures that would be the capstone of my life's work, a definitive academic exploration of the Quranic paradise. I was about to prove, through textual analysis, the precise and unchanging nature of the reward awaiting the righteous. I had no idea that I was about to be thrown headfirst into the ocean I had only ever mapped, and that its waters would dissolve every certainty I had ever held. The crisis arrived not with a bang, but with a sudden, silent erasure. I was standing at the podium in a grand university lecture hall, packed with students and colleagues. I was at the height of my powers, my voice resonating with the confidence of a man who knows his subject absolutely. I was describing the gates of paradise, quoting from the hadith about their immense size and beauty. "The distance between the two gate panels," I said, gesturing with my hand, "is like the distance between," and then the words vanished. Not just the specific words of the hadith, but all words. The connection between my mind and my mouth was severed. A strange metallic taste filled my mouth. The faces of my students began to warp and blur, the lights of the lecture hall swimming in my vision as if I were looking at them from underwater. A profound confusion, a terrifying cognitive fog, descended upon me. My notes on the podium were incomprehensible squiggles. My own hand, resting on the wood, looked like a strange, alien object. I tried to speak, to ask for help, but only a garbled, meaningless sound came out. Panic began to rise in the hall. I saw my trusted colleague, Sheikh Kamal, rushing towards the stage. I felt my legs give way, my body slumping forward, my head hitting the podium with a dull, distant thud. The world tilted on its axis, and then went black. But it was not the end. The next sensation was one of impossible peace and a strange, liberating lightness. The crushing confusion was gone, replaced by a crystalline clarity. I was floating, weightless, near the high arched ceiling of the lecture hall. I looked down at the scene of chaos below. Students were standing, their faces a mixture of fear and concern. Paramedics were rushing in with a gurney. And on the stage, surrounded by frantic figures, was a body. My body. I saw it with a serene, compassionate detachment. There was no fear, no grief, just a quiet curiosity. I was an observer, watching a medical drama unfold. I could hear everything with perfect clarity. Massive hemorrhagic stroke, looks like. No discernible heartbeat. Starting compressions. I watched them work on my still form, feeling a gentle sorrow for the man on the floor, a man who had spent his life studying a map and had died before ever reaching the destination. The scene began to dim, the sounds of the world fading into a profound silence. The lecture hall, my body, the paramedics sit, all dissolved like smoke. I was no longer in that room. I was adrift in a darkness that was more than a mere absence of light. It was a presence, a cold, sterile, and infinitely vast emptiness. It was the silence of a library, where every book has been burned, where all knowledge has ceased to exist. This darkness was not a place of fire or torment, as I had described in my lectures. It was a realm of utter negation. It was a cold, silent void where nothing existed. And in this void, a voice spoke. It was my own voice, but stripped of all warmth and life, an academic, dispassionate echo. "This is the result of your equation," it stated. "You sought knowledge of the unseen. The ultimate knowledge is that there is nothing to be seen. You spent your life describing a destination. You have arrived at the final destination, the end of all things." Shadowy forms began to drift in the void, but they were not demons. They were the ghosts of my own certainties. A towering, translucent book appeared, its pages filled with all my lectures, all my articles, all my carefully constructed arguments about the afterlife. The pages were now blank. The ink had vanished. A figure made of pure logic, a perfect geometric shape, approached me. You built a faith on description and evidence. It communicated, its thoughts precise and cold as ice. But a description of bread cannot feed a hungry man. A map of a garden cannot shelter you from the cold. Your knowledge was a collection of signs pointing to a reality you never truly sought to experience. Now the signs are gone, and you are left with what you had all along, the absence. The terror that grew in me was not a primal fear of pain. It was a sophisticated, intellectual terror. The fear that my entire life's work, my entire belief system, was a grand cosmic delusion. The fear that Zara, my daughter, had been right all along, that we live in a universe of beautiful mathematics but ultimate meaninglessness. My faith, my rock, my fortress of certainty crumbled into dust. The God I had known was a God of words, and in this wordless place, he was absent. My meticulously constructed afterlife was a fantasy, and this cold, empty, eternal void was the truth. It was the ultimate refutation of everything I had ever been. In that absolute desolation, stripped of my scholarship and my pride, I was left with nothing. Not a single verse, not a single theological proof could help me here. All that remained was a raw, primal spark of consciousness, adrift in an ocean of nothingness. From that last spark, a cry erupted, a cry born not of knowledge, but of pure, unadulterated need. It wasn't a formal prayer. It was a single, broken word, a name I had spoken 1,000 times but never truly understood. It was the cry of a creation for its creator, a whisper of light against an eternity of night. Ya Nur, O light. My cry was a fragile, desperate whisper in the infinite, silent vacuum. Yet, it was the only thing in that entire realm that possessed real substance. And it was answered. From the center of my own being, a warmth began to radiate outward. It was not a fire, but a gentle, pervasive glow that pushed back against the cold emptiness. The void did not shatter or flee. It was filled, transformed from within. The terrifying silence was replaced by a harmony, a music so beautiful and complex that it contained every beautiful sound ever made. The darkness became a living, breathing tapestry of light. I realized with a shock of pure joy that the light had not come to me from an external place. It had been there, inside me, all along, a buried seed waiting for the hard soil of my intellectual pride to be broken. I was immersed in an ocean of this conscious, living light. It was pure, unconditional love. It was a love that didn't just accept my flaws. It was utterly indifferent to them, as the sun is indifferent to the small shadows cast by pebbles on the ground. It was the source of all knowledge, but it was not a thing to be studied. It was a reality to be experienced. And from within this infinite ocean of light, a presence made itself known. There was no form, no face, no anthropomorphic image that would diminish its absolute transcendence. It was a concentration of the light, a focal point of the love, a being of unimaginable majesty, and yet of an intimacy so profound it felt like my own heartbeat. My soul knew, with a certainty that made all my books seem like childish scribbles, that I was in the presence of Allah. But this was not the distant, majestic king I had taught others to fear. This was the beloved, the source, the very essence of reality itself. A voice spoke, not in words, but in a direct transmission of pure truth that bloomed within my consciousness. Alim, it said, and my name in that voice was a validation of my entire existence. You are home. Be at peace. All my anxieties, all my strivings, all the intellectual knots I had tied in my own soul, simply unraveled and disappeared. I was known. I was loved. I was home. The joy was so overwhelming, so absolute, it was almost unbearable. I had spent my life drawing maps, and now I was swimming in the ocean. Before you see what is to come, the voice of light communicated. Its love, a constant, unchanging reality. Let us look at what has been, with eyes that see the truth of the heart. My life began to replay around me, but this was no simple memory. I was experiencing my own life from the outside, and from the inside of every person I had ever interacted with. I saw myself as a young, zealous student, arguing with an elderly shopkeeper about the proper way to face for prayer. I remembered the pride I felt in my superior knowledge. But now, I was that shopkeeper. I felt his simple, devotional love for God, a love that had sustained him through a long and difficult life. I felt the sting of my arrogant correction, the way my words had planted a seed of doubt and shame in his heart, making him feel that his lifelong conversation with God was somehow flawed. I had not brought him closer to Allah. I had placed my own knowledge between him and his beloved. The scene changed. I was in my study, surrounded by my precious books, deep in research for a paper on the punishments of the grave. The work was intellectually stimulating, and I felt I was performing an important service. But then, the vision expanded. I saw my wife, Samira, in the next room. She was on the phone with a friend whose child was sick. I listened as Samira spoke words of simple comfort and promised to cook them a meal. I saw her then go to the kitchen, and as she kneaded the dough for the bread, I could see a soft, warm light flowing from her hands into the flour. It was the light of her compassion, her empathy, her love. My academic work was a cold, sterile thing of the mind. Her simple act of kindness was a work of profound, spiritual beauty, an act that was weaving light into the very fabric of the world. I saw myself with my daughter, Zara. We were arguing about the age of the universe. I quoted scripture. She quoted scientific data. I remembered feeling frustrated by her lack of faith. But now, I was her. I felt her genuine awe and wonder at the cosmos, her deep, honest search for truth. I felt that my dogmatic pronouncements were not a loving invitation to faith, but a closed door, a refusal to meet her where she was. I had demanded that she speak my language, without ever trying to learn hers. This life review was not a list of my sins. It was a devastating revelation of my blindness, I had been so obsessed with the fine print of the divine contract that I had completely missed the very heart of it. The overwhelming feeling was not guilt, but a profound, heartbreaking sorrow for all the love I had failed to see, and all the love I had failed to give. When the last scene of my life had been shown, I was left floating in the light, humbled to my very core. The scholar was gone. The expert was gone. All that remained was a beginner, a child standing before the truth for the first time. My Lord, my God, my spirit wept. My entire life, was it a waste? My study, my devotion. The voice of the presence was not a rebuke, but a gentle, loving correction. No life lived in sincere search. For me as a waste, it communicated. But you were a geologist, studying the composition of a mountain, when I wished for you to be a climber, to experience the view from its peak. You became an expert on the map, and you forgot the journey. Now, let me show you the truth of the destination you so diligently described. The vision that opened before me was the single most shocking and beautiful thing I could ever have conceived. It was the truth of paradise. I saw the earth, a vibrant, glowing sphere of life, and I saw that from every living thing, from every human heart, streams of energy were flowing. When a person performed an act of selfless love, a thread of brilliant golden light was created. When an artist created a work of breathtaking beauty, a shower of iridescent, rainbow-colored particles was released. When a scientist made a discovery that filled them with awe, a pulse of clear, white light expanded into the cosmos. Every act of compassion, creativity, joy, forgiveness, and courage was generating a unique form of spiritual light. You taught that paradise was a place I created for the righteous as a reward, the voice of the light explained. That is a metaphor for a truth that is far more beautiful. Paradise is not a static place that I built. It is a dynamic, ever-growing reality that you are building, with me, every moment of your lives. It is the repository of all the love and joy and beauty that has ever been generated in your universe. I then saw it, a vast, shimmering, multidimensional realm of unimaginable beauty. But it was not a garden made of soil and trees. The rivers were not made of milk and honey. The rivers were flowing streams of all the compassion that had ever been shown. The gardens were not filled with physical trees, but with living, growing structures of music and artistry. The mansions were not built of pearl and gold, but were intricate, crystalline structures formed from every act of selfless service and every moment of profound, shared love. This is the shocking truth, Alim, the presence communicated. You do not go to paradise. You become part of it. The joy you feel in the afterlife is the joy you helped create. You will taste the sweetness of the food you gave to the hungry. You will feel the warmth of the comfort you gave to the grieving. You will hear the beauty of the music you inspired. It is a perfect, divine ecology of the soul. This revelation was an earthquake that shattered the very foundations of my belief system. The afterlife was not a passive reward for a life of obedience. It was an active, ongoing, co-creative process with God. Our lives on earth were not a mere test to see if we qualified for entry. Our lives were the very act of building the reality we would one day inhabit. And what of hell? I asked, my soul trembling, afraid of the answer. What of the fire you described in your book? The vision shifted. I was shown a soul that had lived a life of selfishness, cruelty, and hate. It had generated no light. It had only consumed or destroyed the light of others. When this soul passed from the physical world, it was not sent to a place of torture. It simply found itself in a state of absolute isolation, unable to connect to the great, shimmering web of created love and joy. It was in a void of its own making. The fire, the voice of the light explained, its tone filled with an infinite divine sadness, is not a punishment I inflict. It is the agony of a soul experiencing the full weight of the love it rejected. It is the pain of the cold it created. It is the burning thirst for the living water of connection that it refused to drink or to share. My mercy is a gentle rain that falls on everyone, Alim. But some souls choose to live their lives under a stone, and when they die, they are surprised to find that they are dry. The elegance and justice of it were breathtaking. It was a perfect system, but not the cold, legalistic system I had imagined. It was a system built on love, connection, and the irrefutable consequences of our own choices. I was so wrong. My spirit cried out. I taught people to fear your punishment and hope for your reward. I should have been teaching them to love you and to build with you. Now you see, the presence communicated, and I could feel a new urgency, a new purpose, being infused into my soul. You see the truth, and this truth is not for you alone. My children on earth are living in fear. They are so busy trying to earn their way into a paradise they misunderstand that they are failing to create it right where they are. They see life as a waiting room when it is the workshop. I felt a burning desire to go back, to shout this truth from the rooftops. I understood my mission. Go, the voice commanded, a command that was also a blessing. Go back and be a builder. Teach them that every act of love is a prayer that is answered instantly. Every moment of selfless creativity is a brick in the walls of their eternal home. Tell them to stop being religious accountants, tallying up their good and bad deeds. Tell them to become artists, to become gardeners, to become musicians, and to make their lives a masterpiece of love to offer to me and to each other. Go, Alim. Tell them the blueprint for paradise is not in your ancient books. It is written in their own hearts. And with that command, I consented. My life's work was not over. It was just beginning. The return was a brutal, instantaneous collision. One moment I was an infinite point of consciousness in an ocean of loving light. The next, I was slammed back into the claustrophobic, broken confines of my physical form. It was an agony so profound it eclipsed the experience of the stroke itself. A ragged, desperate gasp for air tore through my lungs, a sound that was half sob, half scream. My eyes flew open, and the blurry, chaotic world of the hospital room swam into focus. I saw a nurse's shocked face, her eyes wide as she stared at the monitor beside my bed. "Doctor! Doctor, get in here! We've got brain activity! He's breathing on his own!" The days that followed were a disorienting journey through the landscape of modern medicine. Neurologists marveled at my scans. The damage was catastrophic, one told my family. For him to be conscious, let alone lucid, there is no medical precedent. He should be in a vegetative state at best. They were scientists looking at a flawed map, unable to comprehend the territory I had just traversed. Zara, my brilliant daughter, was a constant presence. Her scientific mind worked overtime to contain the miracle within a logical box. "Dad, the brain's plasticity is incredible," she explained, her voice a mixture of awe and determined rationality. "It's possible a dormant neural pathway took over. It's a 1 in a billion event, but it's not supernatural." She was trying to pull me back to the world of mathematics, while my soul was still vibrating with the music of the spheres. But it was Samira who understood. She needed no explanation. She simply sat by my bed, holding my hand, her eyes shining with a deep, quiet knowing. When we were finally alone, I looked at her and whispered, "Samira, the garden. It's real. But it's not what we thought. We build it. With love." A single tear rolled down her cheek, a tear of pure joy and recognition. "I know, my love," she said softly. "I've been trying to plant a few flowers from it my whole life." Her simple words were the first confirmation that I was not insane, that the message I carried could find fertile ground in a loving heart. The two women I loved most represented the two worlds I now had to bridge, the world of skeptical reason and the world of intuitive faith. The task felt monumental, but the truth I carried was a fire in my bones, a light that could no longer be contained. My old life was a suit of clothes that I could no longer wear. The academic robes, the title of doctor, the reputation, as a leading scholar, they all felt like a costume from a play that had long since ended. As my body healed, my spirit embarked on the difficult work of integration. The world I had returned to was the same, but my perception of it was fundamentally, irrevocably altered. A child's laughter was no longer just a pleasant sound. It was a note in the symphony of heaven. The intricate pattern of a leaf was not just biology, it was a brushstroke of divine artistry. A simple act of kindness between strangers was not just a social grace, it was a sacred act of cosmic construction. My first attempt to share this new reality was with my closest colleague, Sheikh Kamal. He came to visit me at home, overjoyed at my recovery, eager for me to return to the university. We sat in my library, surrounded by the books that had once been my world. With a trembling heart, I told him everything. I described the void, the life review, my intellectual pride being dismantled. He listened with deep empathy. But when I began to describe the vision of paradise, the idea of it being a co-created reality, built from our love and joy, his face tightened. A look of profound alarm came into his eyes. "Alim, my brother," he said, his voice laced with genuine concern. "This is the effect of the trauma. The brain has created a beautiful but dangerous metaphor. What you are describing sounds like pantheism. It removes the distinction between the creator and the creation. It contradicts the clear, explicit descriptions in the Qur'an. The book is not a metaphor, Alim. It is the literal word of God." I tried to explain that it wasn't a contradiction, but a deeper, more beautiful fulfillment of the text, but he held up a hand. "You are unwell," he said, his tone now firm, paternalistic. "You must rest. You must read the Qur'an to cleanse your mind of these fictions. We will tell the university you need more time to recover. We must protect you from this." He thought he was protecting me. In reality, he was locking the door of the cage I had just escaped from. I knew then that my mission was not to debate with the guardians of the maps. My mission was to speak to the other travelers, to those who were thirsty for the water, not for another description of it. I looked around my library, at the thousands of volumes, the life's work of a man I no longer was, and I knew I had to leave it all behind. I resigned my position at the university. The decision sent shockwaves through the academic community. They saw it as a tragedy, a great mind lost to trauma-induced delusion. I saw it as a liberation. I was no longer Dr. Alim Rahman, the eschatological expert. I was just Alim, a humble apprentice in the workshop of paradise. But how to be a builder? Where to begin? The answer came from Samira. "You have always used words," she said. "But now you must use your hands. We sold our large home, gave away most of our possessions, and used the money to start a small foundation. We called it the Jannah Project. Its mission was not to preach, but to plant seeds of paradise on earth. We funded a community garden in a poor neighborhood, not just to provide food, but to give people a chance to create beauty and life with their own hands. We started a small art program for refugee children, giving them paint and clay to express the trauma they could not speak, transforming their pain into beauty. We launched a project to record the life stories of the elderly, honoring their wisdom and preserving the light of their experiences. My daughter, Zara, my loving skeptic, watched this transformation with a bewildered awe. "I don't understand your new cosmology, Dad," she admitted one day as we were planting seedlings in the community garden. "But I can't argue with this." She pointed to a group of children from different backgrounds, laughing as they watered the plants. "Whatever you saw up there, it's making the world down here measurably better. And that's a data point I have to respect." It was her way of saying she saw the light, even if she couldn't explain its source. My new life was a constant lesson in humility. I went from being a respected lecturer to a clumsy gardener, from a renowned author to a man who simply listened to the stories of the forgotten. And in this simple, humble work, I found a joy and a connection to God that all my years of study had never given me. I was finally feeling the salt spray on my face. And so, I feel compelled to speak to you now, directly, from my heart. I am here to tell you a shocking and wonderful truth. You are living in paradise right now. Or rather, you are living in the workshop, where it is being built. Every choice you make, every word you speak, every action you take, is either adding to its beauty or leaving a space empty. Please, I implore you, Stop seeing your life as a test you must pass in order to get a reward. See your life as a canvas you are given to paint a masterpiece. See it as a garden you are asked to tend. Your love, your creativity, your compassion, your joy, these are not just fleeting emotions. They are the eternal building materials of the reality of God. Do not wait for heaven. Participate in its creation. Find a way today to create a moment of beauty, to show an act of selfless compassion, to spark a flicker of joy in another's heart. You will be building a home for your own soul and for all of us. I used to be an expert on the afterlife. Now, I am just a beginner, learning that the path to heaven is not a solitary climb to the sky, but a shared journey of building it, together, right here on the ground.